secret orders to Republican lawmakers. He told them all they should leave the Capitol, get out of the Capitol. So a lot of them actually went to Madison, down to Madison, Indiana, right on the border. So just in case someone came for them, they could easily escape across the river to Kentucky. And so this left the Democrats without a quorum, unable to pass any legislation. Same thing happening where right now? Texas. Well, they assumed, though, they were like, okay, you know what? He's going to do this. They assumed Morton would be forced to call a special session because he was going to need the money to keep the government running and to keep his war effort going and to back Lincoln as much as he wanted to do. He was such a loyalist to Abraham Lincoln. Um, but but he outsmarted him. I love this. He'd already broken the Constitution a few times, acting on his own authority. He by establishing that arsenal and disbanding the assembly. Now, what he did though is he didn't call a special session. He went out and started raising money on his own. He went to a guy named James Lanier. He was a Hoosier who had gone off to New York. He's a big time New York banker now. And Lanier loaned the money to Morton to keep Indiana solvent, to pay the interest on their debt until they were able to reconvene and start collecting taxes again, quite frankly. Everything had been shut down. Everything in the state had been shut down. So he went beyond his constitutional powers and solicited millions of dollars in federal and private loans. Morton's move to subvert state legislature was successful. He was able to get the money. He was able to keep the war effort going. Indiana stayed involved in the war effort, and this did not make the Democrats happy at all. They were furious, furious. In fact, Morton went on to. We have a question out there? No? TK, thanks for joining us, TK. Good to see you. Becky, hello. Edwin, thanks, guys, joining us. Talking about Governor Morton here and the similarities between Governor Morton's actions during the Civil War in Indiana and what is happening today in Texas and across the United States. And we had dissent from both sides, in fact, when he started acting out like this. There were those on his team who also were a little upset about his actions when it came to just violating the Constitution, quite frankly. Now, in 1864, though, the war is starting to enter the end, and Hoosiers were weary. They saw no end in sight. They were preparing for the next gubernatorial election, in fact, and the Constitution prohibited anyone, a governor, in fact, from serving more than 4 years in any 8-year period. So he technically shouldn't have been able to run for re-election. But when he was first elected, this was interesting. When he was first elected, he was part of a deal where he was going to be elected as lieutenant governor, and there was another guy who was going to be the governor. I forget what his name was.
Henry Lane.
Henry Lane. So when the deal was this: if they were to win the election, then Henry Lane would be governor. Morton would be the lieutenant governor, and once he was sworn in, then Lane would then be appointed to Senate and become the U.S. Senator. Is that correct?
That was on the condition that the Indiana Republicans win the Indiana State Legislature, which they did, so they could appoint Lane to the vacant Senate seat.
And so that, in turn, pushed Morton into the governor's office, and that's how he became governor. So now he argued, at this point, that he was eligible to run because he'd only been completing Lane's term. So he should be eligible to run in the upcoming election. Democrats were furious. They launched a bitter campaign against Morton, who did not do a great deal of campaigning. Instead, he successfully returned about 9,000 active duty soldiers home who on leave so that they could come and vote in the election, presumably for Morton, the soldier's friend, as he framed himself and his fellow Republicans as well. So the Democrats at that point, they had had enough, and they accused him of treason. They accused him of rigging the election. Um, it was just a craziness, which is what we're feeling now. But guess what? It goes to a whole nother level. After this election, he appointed a guy, General Harry B. Carrington, for to assist in organizing the state's levies for service. Okay, so he established an intelligence network under Carrington, and this was to deal with the rebel sympathizers affiliated with the Knights of the Golden Circle. And around 1863, the American Knights, which merged with the Sons of Liberty, became the Knights of the Golden Circle. So it was this large sympathizing group of the Confederacy, and he was trying to root it out of the state. He didn't want any of it here. So members of these secret groups, they included Democrats and others who supported states' rights and opposed the Union, and they were totally against the Union during the war. They wanted to actually pull Indiana out of the Union. But Carrington, he did a great job in securing the state. His operatives, they carried out lots of arrests. Unfortunately, it's mirroring a lot of what we're seeing today. They were accused of arbitrary arrests. They suppressed freedom of speech, freedom of association, really repressive control techniques over these Southern sympathizers there weren't a great deal of them, but they were definitely dealt with a strong hand by Carrington under the governor's orders of the time. So similarities today, many would say, what is happening on a federal level, as we're seeing in the headlines of rights being trampled. So very interesting when we're at a time of crisis. What can happen? So what taking this to a whole nother level though was what is known as the Battle of Pogue's Run, and that's when the Democrats, they were having a state convention, right? They're having their state convention, and Carrington, he had sent Morton sent Carrington and some of his troops or enforcers, I guess they would be called, to disrupt the convention. And some of the Democratic leaders were arrested, they were detained, they were threatened. Morton, he also urged pro-war Democrats to abandon the party in the name of unity during the war. And he got some success with that, but this didn't help when the ones who wouldn't do it, he would pull this kind of authoritarianism, as many would frame it, actions towards his opponents, and not just political opponents. He framed them as opponents to the Union. So the guy held out no stops. This guy went after all of his enemies, it seemed, right? So in reaction to Morton, the dissenters in the Indiana Democratic Party, guess what they called him? A dictator. Yes. Dictator. Have we heard this again? And the other one, they called him an underhanded mobster. A dictator and a mobster. They accused him of treason. Treasonable obstructionist tactics are what they accused him of. Illegal activities without approval from the state legislature. Called out the state militia in July 1863. This was another incident in a line of controversial actions by Governor Morton. He was definitely enemy number one of the Democratic Party of Indiana during the Civil War years, his first term into his second term. Now, despite all these controversies, though, one notable thing that a lot of historians like to point out about Morton, and that is that all of the money that he borrowed was accounted for and repaid. There was no political corruption, and he ruled, as they would say, with honesty. and the government was ran with honesty. So regardless of, I guess, his violations of the state constitution in carrying out his duties, they do hold him to a level of honesty for a politician. So he was reelected um, by 20,000 votes in that second election, where he brought in 9,000 troops. So maybe they tipped the scale, maybe they didn't, but we'll see. Anyway, Governor Morton, interesting stuff. Now, would you trust a wartime governor with sweeping authority if you had to live in a society where we were in the middle of a civil war? Yeah, strong leadership's essential in a crisis, right? That's what I would think. Um, and as they say, your local government has so much more power and control over your everyday life as opposed to the federal government. And being entrenched in your local government with your local politicians, you have a lot more access this way as well. So yeah, I mean, I would go with it, only with oversight, I guess, right? Because they need to have checks and balances just like everyone else. Um, but too much power is dangerous, as we can see, right? Even in war, too much power can be dangerous. And I guess you need to consider the track record of the politician, or in this case, the governor as well. But, or would you fear that kind of power in one person's hands? History shows that, when someone has that a great deal of power, it can lead to abuse. But sometimes survival requires decisive control. So which is it? Where do we go? Um,
I mean, Lincoln temporarily suspended habeas corpus in D.C. because of their proximity to Virginia and Maryland, which was full of Southern sympathizers, such as John Wilkes Booth. So sometimes drastic situations call for drastic action.
yeah, they do, and that's the thing is people some of these actions to today. Well, they were in the middle of the Civil War, and the governor of Indiana, one of his biggest fears, he was terrified that Kentucky was going to leave the Union, join the Confederacy, and be right on his border. He was very, very concerned about that. And I could see why. It was very, very close. The war would be in Indiana's backyard. And to think about it, there was only that one incursion during the war in Corydon, Indiana. So people will say that he actually did quite a great job at keeping the war out of Indiana and keeping the sympathizers at bay in Indiana. What do you folks think? Let us know in the comments if you've got anything to add about Governor Morton here. And what leadership qualities do you think matter most in crisis? What do you think? Let us know in the comments. Hey, Scotty Sells Rides. Thanks for being here, Scotty. Good to see you, brother. If you're not following Scotty Sells Rides, you got to go follow Scotty Sells Rides, everybody. Deb, great to see you. Norma, fantastic. Baron Shirley, hey, brother. Good to see you out there. Tell us, what leadership qualities matter most in a crisis, folks? Huh? Anybody? Anybody? Decisiveness. Yes. Good call there, boy. Thank you so much. Compassion. Okay, we got another one. Compassion. Integrity. Yes, integrity. But people will question that. There's a Deb. Thanks, Deb, for your response as well. Vision. Focus on the big picture, not just survival, I guess, would be important in a wartime effort. But if your survival is in danger, then it's hard to focus on the big picture beyond when you're going to get that next meal, right? So Governor Morton, very interesting, man. And as I said earlier, the first governor of Indiana born in the state of Indiana and from Centerville, Indiana. In fact, you got to go back. If you haven't seen it, go back and check out our YouTube channel for our season 1 long form episodes. We do an episode in Centerville. Incredible story. Governor Morton relates to the story then as well. In fact, he was governor of Indiana when our Centerville story goes down. And interesting stuff. You got to check it out. It involves a cannon. It involves all the local folks in a little town called Centerville battling their neighbors in Richmond. Yes, Richmond, Indiana, that is. So check it out on our YouTube channel. Um,
I believe they fired kitchenware out of a cannon. Was that incident?
it was, they filled it with just whatever kind of scrap that they could find and they shoved it in the cannon. And it was their ceremonial cannon too. It wasn't something that they used in battle. They'd use it in parades and they'd fire off at a picnic or something. So check it out. It's on our YouTube channel. It's in season 1, Indiana Story with me at Centerville. The shot heard around Indiana, I think, is the title of the episode. You have to check it out. But back to Governor Morton on this story, other than being from Centerville. Incredible, isn't it, folks? How we are repeating history to a degree. I wouldn't say repeating. We don't really actually repeat history, as people say. There are lessons to be learned from history, and often those lessons aren't learned, and so we repeat some of the punching in the face that we took the first time around to try and understand the lesson to be learned. So same thing here. We're doing it again, folks. We're doing it again. Same thing that Governor Morton dealt with back throughout his career as the governor of Indiana. We are now dealing with on a, I don't want to say national level quite yet, but we are seeing it pop up in states. We've seen it in Texas. We're seeing it now in New York and California. And who knows where it's going to land next with this power plays. But what do you think is more important? Who do you support? Do you support the local governor, or do you support the nation when it comes to states' rights? Are you for the states' rights, or are you for the nation? That's the big question, right? That's the debate. The 10th Amendment, correct? The amendment that delegates certain powers specifically, yes, to the states. So good stuff, folks. Good stuff. Thanks for diving into Indiana history with us here in this Indiana Story Minute Live as we talked about Governor Morton and his parallels to present day. It's incredible stuff, isn't it? I appreciate you joining us. Hey, be sure to follow us and check out our latest video. Today, there was one that came out. Don't know what it is.
Indiana Airport.
Oh, yeah, Indianapolis Airport. Have you seen the solar panels there? It's an amazing story. It's the world's largest airport solar farm. Check it out, and we'll see you next time. Next week, we'll be back with another live conversation, talking, I don't know. It's going to be a surprise. We'll find out. Send us a message. Let us know in the comments what you want us to cover in Indiana Story Live. And we'll jump back on here next Wednesday, 3 o'clock Pacific, 6 Eastern. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll see you next time. Have a great evening, and keep making history.